Good morning, everyone. It's Joker. I'm awake again, so now we can keep recording, and I realized, based on some comments on the initial live stream video, that I missed this very important detail right here. So, if you remember months and months ago, where we used to get a free copy of the battle unit for completing the bingo board, well, it seems that this meta, based on missions, I don't think it's a bingo board, but it could be a bingo board, we'll actually be getting a free copy of the Protector, which is huge. So they value Protectors really, really highly. So giving away a free copy of her, especially a stacking one, is really, really generous. So that's very good. But I just wanted to point that out because I missed it, and it is quite a big thing. But let's move on to the actual topic of today's video, and that is the skill revamp. So we have the full list of units right here that are getting the revamp. So Raphael, Guy, and then Valentine, Diablo, Dark Rimuru, Shizu, Millum, Trainee, and Velzard. And then alongside the 7 Octagram battle units. So for this video, because we have a few units to cover, we'll be talking about the normal battle units, and then I'll make a separate video going over the Octagram units because it would just be so much information. So starting off, I'd like to give a shout out to my boy Roxis for translating these, so thank you to him for doing this. So, we have all of the characters pulled up here so we can look at all of their current skills and then what they are currently changing to, which he has also done, but, you know, visuals are a thing, right? So, here we go. Let's scroll up a little bit. So, Valentine. So, she is getting her healing skill changed, which is really nice. So cost goes from 25 skill points to 15 skill points. So that is very big. A 15-point heal. It heals the same amount, so still 25% of their max HP. And it used to increase green orb damage by 5% up to 100, which was fine because she was a green-focused meta, and she still is really good for green metas. Now, she still heals by 25%, but she increases all orb damage by 5%. So permanent buff for any orb no matter what team you're running. So you could put her on other teams just as a healer by herself, and she can still heal you for cheaper and buff your orb damage across the board. So that is a very, very, very big combo right there. I do kind of wish that they had reduced her orb change cost down to 25 as well, but that's kind of nitpicky. I think this is the better skill because healing is very important, especially in Valor Cup. So that's a good thing right here. Moving on to Dark Diablo. So they changed his personal attack skill. So it used to be... Can we zoom in on this? Oh, yes, okay. So it used to be his own attack was 25%, and then he would lower everyone's dark resistance by 10%. Now, he's giving himself a 30% buff and lowering dark resistance by 50%. So, not too big of a buff on his attack. However, dark resistance by 50% is really, really big, especially coming from 10%. So that's just going to make you hit so much harder. And, you know, we have quite a few Dark Diablos, alright? Let's not joke about that. We have a few Dark Diablos. So he can help all of them hit just a little bit harder, including himself. So I think that's pretty good. You can stick him on like the Dark Anniversary team. He's not magic though, so he won't get that massive Veldora buff. But lowering dark resistance by 50% is better than what I think Shinsha does, which is 10% on her buff skill. So a lot better there. So, and then yeah, if you don't have another support unit to bring, but you still want to do a bit more damage, you can bring him. So it works out. Moving on to Dark Rimuru. Demon Lord Rimuru, the unit that I initially never summoned on his banner because I just didn't like it, and I waited until he came back on a rerun. So they're buffing his personal skill. So it used to be guaranteed crits and 15% crit damage, which at the time was pretty good, but AoEs were not a thing, right? It was just not great. He was good for normal orbs if you happen to get a whole bunch of his normal orbs, but we didn't have any orb stealers. at the time, so it was kind of meh. Now, he's giving himself 100% crit rate for 3 turns and 30% crit damage for 3 turns. So not only has he doubled his crit damage, but he's tripled, well, his crit turns that he has crit. And then he gets an extra turn for the crit damage, which never really made too much sense to me for this skill initially, because he's like, he has guaranteed crits for 1 turn, but he can do extra crit damage for 2 turns. Like, but the crit ran off. And you're going to use it again, so you're going to have another turn of crit damage with no crit. So I was very confused by that all the time. So I'm glad they have made it the same turn count, because it was just dumb. It was just dumb. The skill cost is also the same. Did Diablo's skill cost go down? No. Okay, so those skill costs still remain. So this is a pretty good skill. He's not the greatest thing in the world. He is an attack growth unit, so he can do okay, you know, AoE damage. But Dark Anniversary Rimuru is a thing, and he gives guaranteed crits and 40% crit damage to Dark allies, which this Rimuru is. Granted, it's very specific to Dark allies, but this one's just really cheap because it's 15 skill points, so you could pop it pretty much whenever. So it does work. Moving on to Fire Shizu. So Shizu has a very weird place in my heart, this Fire Shizu, because she was the second to last banner. No, she was, I think, the last banner unit I had yet to pull when the game originally came out. It was either her or Gazel, because Gazel just hated me, and I needed him for DPS, but he never wanted to show up. But him and Shizu never showed up, so I had to play, you know, Master Golem and EX Golem without the stun dodger for that stage, and it was quite frustrating. But they have buffed her, you know, slightly. Stun dodging isn't really a thing in today's meta. Not too many things stun you consistently enough to make her worthwhile. She's also balance growth. She's not like a pure DPS unit. She's an orb changer, which is fine, but then like the second skill of stun dodging is just kind of meh. It's kind of a throwaway. But they did, I guess, make it better, because it used to be guaranteed stun dodge for 1 turn for everybody, and then she gave herself 15% extra crit rate, which, whatever. Her new skill, though, is guaranteed stun dodge for 3 turns, and then her own attack buff by 25%, also for 3 turns. This is a much better skill. You cannot rely on 15%, right? No matter what you want to say. Trying to shoot for a 15 or really 17% based on her basic stats already, you don't want to do that. Just guaranteed attack buff for 3 turns is good. And then the stun dodge, I feel this is more geared towards newer players who are trying to beat the Golem first time. And the Golem stuns you every turn 2 and turn 5. I think the end of turn 2 and the end of turn 5. So if you use this new stun dodge, you'll actually just avoid both of those, which is great. So it means that you'll never have to really worry about it. Chance to stun all targets 100% for 2 turns. So, yeah. Having it be 3 turns is good for beginners. She's not a big wonky DPS. She does have viability in a stage where new people may have problems. I think it's fine. She was never going to be a super wanked out unit, so I think just giving her more viability for newer players is probably the best thing you could have done, because her orb change was fine. You couldn't really do much to that, so they had to change this skill. Moving on to Windmillum. Very interesting character because she's an alt buffer, and they didn't really touch that. So she used to give 70% alt damage, and then she gave herself 20% crit damage, which I actually showed a team using her as a DPS in the last Jubilee video for normal 2. And that crit damage actually, it does make a difference for her. But overall, not the greatest thing in the world, because normally, she is not a nuker, right? Now, she's still giving the same 70% alt damage buff, which is fine. It's perfectly fine. But then she buffs wind allies crit damage by 30%. So not just herself, but other wind units get the extra crit damage, which would, mean you would need someone to give the rest of the wind units crit. But we have a few units that can do that now. And it's not restricted to just her, and it's also 10% higher. and it's the same cost. So, I mean, I don't really see a problem with it. You still needed someone to give Millum crit to even, activate the part of her skill the first time around. So, it will play almost no differently. You just need the hero. You need Fire Millum or something like that. I mean, it's not the greatest skill in the world. Again, you can't really do much to this specific skill because making the ult damage go any higher would be too big of a change, I think. Because we're just now, like tonight, we're getting Guy, who is doing 80%. The only other unit that has 80% ult damage is, Space Leon and Dark Diablo 2.0, who only give it to themselves, right? So, it's fine that they left this. I wish they would have changed her second skill, though. Like, increases all allies' guard penetration by 50%. Guard penetration is friggin' useless. Like, okay, cool, so he guards and we do less damage, but we can amp the damage by 50% more, but it's still being reduced. This skill is dumb. I really wish they had changed this skill instead into Pierce Raid and Pierce Power for all allies or something, or just herself. I don't know. This skill's trash. It should have been changed more than this crit damage part. So that's just my opinion. Next up is Earth Trainee. So they didn't touch her heal skill, which I think is fine. 30% HP for 30 skill points. It's still pretty good. She was a mainstay on all of my tower runs when I had to use magic teams, so she works out. But they changed her second skill, which used to be decreases all targets' pierce power by 20%. This was a godsend for EX Millum Conquest when it came out, because that was the hardest event in the game, and now we can one-turn it. So it's a joke now. But back then, when we didn't have such power creep, she hit hard. If she wanted someone dead, you were dead. So reducing her pierce power, increasing her pierce resistance was the whole name for beating that stage. So this was important. This was very important for keeping your units alive, alongside being healer. Now, it is pierce power down by 30% for 3 turns. So the extra 10% on the reduction. And then also adds a new effect which reduces the damage taken from ults by allies by 50% for 3 turns. So again, this is a unit that I feel is more geared towards newer players who need to beat Conquest Millum, and this will just help out. Now, I say that with quotation marks that you can't see because I don't have face cam on right now, but the amount of materials that it's going to take to get this skill awakened all the way is not a new player friendly. We'll put it that way. So realistically, this skill is meh. You can bring it, and she's still probably going to be a mainstay in tower, and this skill will help from taking ults that you may or may not take during, your boss runs or whatever. And it is fairly good. 50% ult damage reduction for 3 turns for 15 skill points. I mean, that's good. The pierce power is negligible. But, this damage reduction by ults is good for the cost and the turn limit. So I'm fine with that. Do I wish they had changed the heal to be like 35, 40%? Sure. But it didn't need to be changed. This skill needed some extra stuff to it, though. So, it works out. And then we have Velzard. Water Velzard. Wait, where's Raphael? Where's Raphael and Guy? Wait, did we cover Guy? Hold on. Dark Shizu, Dark Rimuru, Dark Diablo. No, okay, so we'll have to go over Guy and Raphael. But Velzard. So she was a DPS unit. Velzard was a DPS unit. She's still only 92 for me, so hilarious. But her current skill is her own attack buff by 30% and her own pierce power by 15%. So now they've kind of gone a different direction with this. So increases her own attack by 35% for 1 turn, so 5% buff right there. And then instead of giving herself pierce power, she reduces enemies' pierce resistance by 35%. So it's no longer a double buff for her, it's a buff and a debuff. Which, if when we check out Raphael, makes maybe a little bit more sense, but just by itself, it's kind of like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just buff her attack by 35 and her pierce power by 35? It was an interesting decision. The Frostbite, I think, is fine. Maybe they could have added a new effect to it for maybe put, like, pierce resistance here down, and then leave this skill. Like, maybe that would have made a little bit more sense, because the Frostbite, even if it was only 15% resistance down, it would have been 18%, somewhere around there, because of the Frostbite effect. So I think that would have been a better use of it. But let's check out Raphael, which I don't think he translated, so we'll have to go check that out in game. So, news. All these units are also in the news right here, so new skill fusion feature if you do want to check them out in a more condensed, I guess, setting. Where is Raphael? There's Raphael. Okay, so Raphael, his previous skill. So reduces defense by 40%, which goes up to 50%, and then increases his own pierce power by 30% for 2 turns. So this worked well because Water Alice was giving the pierce and the water resistance down. So that made sense, giving himself pierce power, alongside Velzard giving herself pierce power. Now, defense goes up. I think it's to 50%? What's it say in the video? Yeah, so defense down up to 50% instead of 45%, and then increases all water allies' pierce power by 50%. So that's why they took away the pierce power from Velzard, because no matter what they did to that skill, they weren't going to buff it up to 50. And having her keep it, and then giving Raphael this pierce power, would be redundant and pretty much a waste. So that's why they put pierce resistance onto Velzard now, because Raphael's going to give pierce power, which will still work pretty well, because now Velzard, or Water Alice is giving the pierce rate and water resistance down by 30%. Raphael's lowering defense and increasing pierce power. Velzard is lowering pierce resistance and giving herself attack. And then you put Frostbite on that, and it will amplify the defense down, it will amplify the water resistance and the pierce resistance. So this is a pretty big buff for the water team, if you have him, and if you can find a way to integrate him in. So I think this works out pretty well. And then let's talk about Guy. So Guy previously was just ceiling defense, and that was it. So there was the Jubilee, where they had an ungodly amount of defense forever, and then this skill just sealed it, so they went back down to normal. Now, it is still sealing the defense, and also increasing fire allies' physical attack. So I'm pretty sure no one on the Fire 2.0 team gives physical attack. So, because Violet gives herself Pierce and crit, right? Pierce and crit rate, and then her own attack buff. Fire Shizu is giving the fire attack buff, and the pierce power buff, and then the AoE debuff. And then Fire Millum is giving guaranteed crits and sealing crit resistance, which is fine, but you don't need that because Violet's already critting. So physical attack for fire units will add on to what Violet can currently do, unless you bring Water Raphael. And then he's doing 65% physical attack. But if you don't have EX Rimuru, then Guy works out, because one, he'll be another fire unit, which is going to buff the EX board and increase the amount of burn damage you do if you have to hit with him. It's just that this skill is still going to cost 55 points, and it's hard to use this and the ult buff on the same turn with the fire buff from Shizu, because those are all 55 point skills, and Toa only gives 40. Right? So at most, if you have double Toa and full points, you have 185 points, which I guess... 180. So I guess if you have double Toa somehow, because you just got a lucky hand of unnerfed blues, then yes, theoretically, you could use all 3 of these skills at once. if you have all the other skills also active. But there are other skills that will help the Fire 2.0 team do more damage that maybe you want to use as well. So what you'll end up doing is you'll be using the Fire buff early and then holding it on Violet in the back and then getting more points to use this and some other things. So I think this is a good skill. It's just expensive and it may or may not actually work out because this is not nearly as good as this ult buff or the fire attack buff. So I guess it's just an option if you don't have Shizu or you don't have anyone else. So that is all of the units that are getting the revamp as far as normals are concerned. So let me know what you guys think about the skill changes for these units. I think most of them are pretty good, but there are a few kind of duds in here, or ones that are not that overly useful for a lot of players. Older players will have better options. Newer players won't be able to awaken these skills at all, so it's kind of like why. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. I will do a separate video on the Octagem units, which I will record right after I hit end here. So that's it for me, guys. Take it easy, and I'll see you later.